bankers whispered to politicians, socialism will make you rich. 60 years behind the throttle, the new world is right on track. The United Nations Army will enforce their global plan. From Roosevelt to Clinton, they're traitors every man. Congress sold out the country, our treasury is broke. You can't redeem America with Federal Reserve notes. The ballot box quit working, the cartridge box is freedom's king. It's all over but the fighting, the fat lady's about to sing. They stole our silver, they stole our gold, they took our steel, they took our gold. They stripped our trees and robbed our roads and sold our jobs to Mexico. Congress sold out the country, our treasury's broke. You can't redeem America with Federal Reserve notes. The ballot box quit working, the cartridge box is freedom's king. It's all over but the fighting, the fat lady's about to sing. You can call me a right-wing wacko, I read the writings on the wall. I also read the Bible, God's hammer's about to fall. Sold out. The ballot box quit working, the fat lady's about to sing.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash, Washington.
We interrupt our program to bring you a special broadcast. The German news agency...
We interrupt this program to bring you a news bulletin from Washington.
Special report. Verdict sparks violence. National Guard troops are standing by, ready to patrol the streets of Los Angeles, rocked by widespread violence.
Local governments almost have to go with their hat in their hand to the federal government for permission to do anything.
Hello, I'm Alex Jones, and I'm a syndicated radio and television host based in Austin, Texas. And for many years, I've been exposing the criminal elite, also known as the New World Order. Throughout history, corrupt individuals in positions of power have used crises, or what is known today as terrorism, as a way to corral populations into accepting a system of more and more control. Ladies and gentlemen, I love America. I love the United States. I love our constitutional republic. I love what the red, white, and blue symbolizes. Our constitutional republic, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. And we're losing that. We've been losing that for many years in this country. So before I tell you all of this shocking information, before we reveal it with 100% documentation, it's key for you to understand that only by the population being informed and spreading this information to the grassroots can we avert this disaster. And this is a warning to the public, a warning to America, a warning to the world for those that will see this film. Ladies and gentlemen, more terrorism is on the way. September 11th was only the latest in a long line of terror events worldwide in recent history, being orchestrated by the shadow government globally to usher in a system of total control. Hence the name of this documentary film, 911, The Road to Tyranny. Now, the system of crisis creation, for the new term scarism instead of terrorism, is problem, reaction, solution. In fact, it's called the Hegelian dialectic from the philosopher Hegel. You create a crisis, you create fear, the people say to the government, something must be done, what is the government going to do about it? And then the government comes in with the prepackaged solution to take more and more freedoms, to garner more and more systematic control. And this dictatorship that we see forming globally, this New World Order, is scientific in its propaganda, in its information war against the people of this planet. So when I talk about the government being behind the September 11th attacks, I'm talking about the people that control our government. I'm talking about this society of criminals that has taken control of it. And we're going to go through all of it. We're going to talk about what the globalists want, what they're getting out of this terrorist attack, and how they preconditioned you that giving up your freedoms would be the solution. So we'll go through this large selection of documentation. And then we'll get into a key section, government prior knowledge, how people controlling the United States government, the European Union, and many other countries in this world actually engineered, funded, protected, shepherded the terrorist into this country, and how the very same group of Islamic terrorists funded and protected by the federal government were actually involved in the Oklahoma City bombing, the tragedy back in 1995. So we're going to talk about how the government had prior knowledge and how they protected the terrorist and how they funded the terrorist, and then what they're getting out of it, why they would do it. But more importantly, we're going to talk about actual government documents, actual U.S. government plans going back into the early 1960s to blow up airliners full of Americans, sink ships, you name it. Now, I know that's shocking to a lot of people and it's hard to believe, but please stay with us. We're going to go through all of it from A to Z. And if you'd like to read all of these mainstream news articles, government documents, executive orders, legislation, they're all in a special section of my website, Infowars.com, because the people using our secret weapon, the truth, are going to have to counter this system. So again, we're going to talk about how the government funded, trained, protected the terrorist, how they had prior knowledge, and then how they preconditioned us before the attack that, oh, the attack's coming, and when it does, you're going to have to give up your liberty for security. And now, 3 months after the September 11th attacks, here in late 2001, December 7th, as we're taping the show, we're seeing exactly that. So again, please stay with us for this entire presentation. Your safety, your family's safety, and the very future of the United States and the world is hanging in the balance. Because since the crisis, since the calamity of September 11th, the New World Order has come busting out of the gates, telling us that we have to accept world government and give up all of our freedoms, all of our God-given rights, or the bad terrorists are going to get us again. And you have to ask yourself, who stands to gain from all these terrorist events? Who gets more funding? Who gets more control? Who gets to be our saviors? It's the classic system, the Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution. So stay with us. Now again, I know some of you out there are saying, this is ridiculous. I don't want to hear any more of this. This guy doesn't have this evidence. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is ABC News, and this is May 1st, 2001, months before the September 11th attack. Here it is for you, in your face. Friendly fire. U.S. military drafted plans to terrorize U.S. cities to provoke war with Cuba. And it says, casualty list, that's list of dead Americans, in U.S. newspapers would cause a helpful wave of indignation or anger. And it's all right here, ABC News, May 1st. Of course, the story first broke in the Baltimore Sun on April 24th. And I actually interviewed James Bamford, who broke the story, former 2020 executive and best-selling author who found these documents that had been declassified. We believe someone leaked it inside the government, wanting to warn us of the future government attack of September 11th. But you don't have to believe these news articles, and they are posted on Infowars.com. But you do have to face the facts. You do have to face the evidence of the top secret special handling document that was only declassified in 2000. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen, justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. Signed by L.L. Lemonster, Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff. You see that? This is where the United States government actually planned to blow up airliners full of American citizens, to bomb Washington. I forgot to tell you about that. to attack the Marines at Guantanamo Bay, to blame it on the communist Cubans as a pretext to invade that country. Now, this is a United States government document, ladies and gentlemen. Top secret, special handling, and it's now been declassified. Now, that's the facts. It's been in the news before September 11th. They won't dare talk about this story after September 11th. ABC News, May 1st. Baltimore Sun, April 24th. There's the facts. The government planned this exact type of operation before September 11th. Think about it. And they even brag about how the U.S. government blew up the Maine way back at the turn of the century as a pretext to have the Spanish-American War. They brag for 20-plus pages about how problem reaction solution has been used throughout history. It's their classic game. It's their favorite mode of control. And again, don't believe the documents that I just showed you. I want you to go check it out at Infowars.com in the government prior knowledge section. And when you read that ABC News article, when you read that Baltimore Sun article, when you link through the National Security Archives and read the document, the actual declassified document, for yourself, where the government planned things along the exact lines of what we all witnessed on September 11th, that horrible tragedy, then you'll be forced to know it's true. Then you'll be forced to take action. So don't dismiss the things we're uncovering here for a single solitary second. And as well, later on in this presentation, I'm going to actually show you a clip off my television show from July 25th, right here in Austin, Texas, when I predicted that the federal government was preparing to attack America with phony terrorist attacks as a pretext for martial law and control. And then we'll get into the evidence that clearly states that we're already under martial law. But it's what implement, what level, what degree of martial law are we going to accept as it grows, as they incrementally condition us to accept it. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Problem, reaction, solution. And there are many other government documents we don't even have time to cover in this presentation. But this is an interactive expose, so please visit Infowars.com, government prior knowledge of the September 11th attack section. Now is a good time to go ahead and tell you about some of the players, some of the highly respected journalists, prosecutors, government officials that went public before September 11th saying that an attack on Lower Manhattan was imminent. One of them, of course, is David Shippers, the former prosecutor in Chicago who brought down one of the biggest organized crime families in U.S. history. He's a little bit more well known for being the prosecutor that the House Judiciary Committee hired to impeach William Jefferson Clinton, the President of the United States. I've interviewed David Shippers twice since the September 11th attack, and I actually have news articles where before the September 11th tragedy, David Shippers was representing FBI agents and defense intelligence officers, and we'll get more into this later and show you the actual documents on that as well, the actual BBC and Washington Times news articles. Why was David Shippers representing FBI and defense intelligence officers and agents? Well, because they were being threatened by the Bush administration in 2001 that they would be arrested under national security if they attempted to stop the Al-Qaeda terrorist operating in this country that the federal government was publicly funding to the tune of $132 million in the 2 months leading up to September 11th alone. And again, all of these news stories are coming up and are posted on my website. I mean, it's hard to believe. I don't even know how to do this presentation. There's so much evidence. It's just mounds of it, stacks of it. Understand, ladies and gentlemen, this is a major crisis. They're using this to destroy our freedom. They're using this to usher in nightmarish levels of control. This is the biggest issue the biggest event in human history. Not because of the 3,000 people dead, that was a horrible tragedy, but because of the societal de-evolution, the dehumanization that we're witnessing. Humankind being taken literally into the depths of a worldwide police state. So understand, ladies and gentlemen, David Schippers was beating on John Ashcroft, the U.S. Attorney General's door, saying, I've got 3 boxes of files. I represent these FBI agents, these defense intelligence officers, who you have told you will arrest if they stop the terrorist training at the Pensacola Naval Air Station with the U.S. military, training them to fly large aircraft. Months before the attack, in early 2001, later we'll get to an MSNBC and Pensacola News-Journal report on that, several mainstream reports, that the U.S. government was funding these terrorists. So David Schippers is begging them, beating on the door, calling them, saying, you've got to stop them. They're going to hijack these planes very soon. He even got Jana Davis, the investigative reporter who exposed government involvement in the Oklahoma City bombing in '95, on the O'Reilly factor, March 14th. But O'Reilly, of course, cut that segment short, and wouldn't let her get all the warnings out. So think about the magnitude of this. David Schippers was beating on the Justice Department's door, calling Congress, meeting with them, begging them to stop the terrorist attacks. But they wouldn't listen. And since September 11th, he's been doing radio interviews all over this country. But the newspapers won't touch it. They will, though, cover many of the facets of it, and we're going to get into it. So now is a good time, before we get into the key section of this expose, to play a clip of George W. Bush, George Bush Jr., the son of former President Bush, the son of the former CIA director, President Bush, the son of the former head UN ambassador, President Bush, the son of the former ambassador to China, George Herbert Walker Bush. And I tell you all of the former presidents' titles so you understand that they're very good at lying. They're very good at putting on a phony face and conning you. That's what the CIA does, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very wicked organization. It's public knowledge now. They bring in the majority of the narcotics. And George Bush ran that organization. And now his son runs this country. The current president's father was a UN ambassador, was an ambassador to China, was the head of the CIA. Face the facts. So before we get into government prior knowledge and involvement, and go through these stories one by one in detail, from a host of mainstream media sources, but no one's putting it all together for you. They're just quietly reporting it. But the nightly news doesn't pick it up and magnify it like they do O.J. Simpson or Congressman Condit, issues of little or no significance. Before we get to this key area of the film, but every facet is vital, so please stay with us. I hope you have the attention span to do it. I know they've tried to condition that out of you. Let's play President Bush, November 10th, at the United Nations General Assembly. And he took time out to attack the American people and others that at that very time, at that very point, were exposing him, even in the BBC, for funding, training, protecting, and shepherding the terrorists into this country with prior knowledge and letting them attack us. This shows we're getting to Bush, this phony conservative. He's worse than Clinton. Bill Clinton was a complete criminal. We exposed all of that endlessly. The sellout of the missile secrets, the rapes, the murders, the anti-Second Amendment behavior. But in comes George Bush, and the good conservatives of this country are supposed to go to sleep? Not for a second. And then we're going to have a clip of Attorney General John Ashcroft claiming they're not taking our rights away a little bit later in the show. And then we're going to cover the actual legislation, the actual USA Patriot Act, H.R. 3162, that abolishes 3 major amendments to our Bill of Rights, to our Constitution. So it's all coming up, ladies and gentlemen. Here is George W. Bush son of the former president, son of the former CIA director, son of the former UN ambassador and Chinese ambassador, who in 1991, on September 11th, at the very same podium, pledged the American people to a sacred oath to the United Nations. He pledged you and I to the murdering, anti-American, world government promoting United Nations. And now here's his son, all these years later in 2001, saying, don't blame people, don't blame us for this. Here's George Bush. Stay with us.
We must speak the truth about terror. Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th, malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
For you will lose your liberty. We need honest, reasoned debate, not fear-mongering. To those who pit Americans against immigrants and citizens against non-citizens, to those who scare peace-loving people with phantoms of lost liberty, my message is this: your tactics only aid terrorists, for they erode our national unity and diminish our resolve. They give ammunition to America's enemies and pause to America's friends. They encourage people of goodwill to remain silent in the face of evil. Our efforts have been crafted carefully to avoid infringing on constitutional rights while saving American lives. Some of our critics, I regret to say, have shown less affection for detail. Their bold declaration of so-called facts have quickly dissolved upon inspection into vague conjecture. Charges of kangaroo courts and shredding the Constitution give new meaning to the term fog of war.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I know it's a lot to absorb, but just stay with us. And remember, check out every piece of evidence we're bringing forward. And when you find out all of this is true in triplicate, it's voluminous, then you'll be forced to take action. And we've got some solutions to fight this New World Order coming up at the end of the film. Let's go ahead and go into this large folder of government prior knowledge. This is only a small selection of the news stories that we have to prove this at Infowars.com. Here's CNN. U.S. warned in 95 of plot to hijack planes, attack buildings. Actual news article. U.S. warned in 95 of plot to hijack planes and attack buildings. And this article goes into great detail about how the FBI in 95 had actually intercepted terrorists and knew of their plans to hijack aircraft and crash them in to lower Manhattan. Just establishing that the government doesn't need any more funding, doesn't need any more control over our lives. They knew all about this. But you see, they don't get more funding until more terrorist attacks take place. Here's one from the Los Angeles Times, December 5th, 2001. Clinton let bin Laden slip away and metastasize. Sudan offered up the terrorist and data on his network inside the United States. The then president and his advisors didn't respond. See, they're all members of the Council on Foreign Relations. They're all members of the Trilateral Commission. They're all members of the Bilderberg Group. And I know you've been told on the news that those organizations don't exist. We'll play you the Council on Foreign Relations on national television a little bit later in this expose, saying that the terrorist attack is empowering world government. We'll let that come out of the mouth of former Senator Gary Hart at a CFR meeting on national television. Again,
we didn't, unlike what we've said today, we didn't just emphasize the negative, the dangers. We emphasized the opportunities. And Americans are brilliant at many things, not least of which is turning lemons into lemonade. There is a chance for the President of the United States to use this disaster to carry out what his father, a phrase his father used, I think, only once, and hasn't been used since, and that is a new world order. Think about this.
Again, just check out the evidence for yourself. Here it is. Clinton let bin Laden slip away and metastasize. Sudan offered to arrest him and tried to give him data on the network here in the U.S., and Clinton didn't want it. That was in 96 and then again in 98. How did Clinton respond to them? He bombed their aspirin factory, their medical factory that was supplying about a third of Africa with medicines. Now we're getting into the really hardcore evidence. And are you going to wake up out there, people? Or are you just going to be a face in the crowd that doesn't affect change, that doesn't have power? God created you to affect change, to be involved, to be a factor, to be in that arena, not to be a spectator. This is from the Times of London, one of the most highly respected newspapers in England. Wednesday, March 7th, 2001, before September 11th. See, we were already covering this on my radio show. We were saying bin Laden was about to attack and that Bush was funding him and that they were going to then declare martial law, which they've done. CIA worked in tandem with Pakistan to create the Taliban. And that was from March 7th, the Sunday Times of London. And it talks about the Central Intelligence Agency and the CIA worked with Pakistani intelligence, which they put into power, to fund Al-Qaeda and to fund the Taliban with hundreds of millions of dollars a year. $132 million in 2001 alone. And, of course, the head of Pakistani intelligence, which is publicly has to be approved by U.S. funding to that country by the CIA, wired $100,000 to Muhammad Atta, the lead hijacker. All here in the Sunday Times of London. CIA worked in tandem with Pakistan to create the Taliban. And we hear about how the Taliban tortures people, how they kill people, how they deal drugs, which is all true, how they're evil, which is obviously true, how they're oppressive. And our government, the cabal that runs it, put them into power. Put them into power. So that later they could bring them down and the Afghan people would accept anybody over the Taliban, the worst regime in their history, worse than the Russians. And guess who that is now? The United Nations just publicly took it over, the biggest opium production area in the world, and they're out planting their fields. It's in the news. The UN's letting them plant their heroin. And, of course, it has the second biggest oil reserves in the world, and Dick Cheney, the vice president's company, Halliburton, just completed the pipeline 2 months before September 11th into Afghanistan. And now the UN and all these big private banks get all the natural resources. You see how the scam works. Set up a boogeyman, let him attack your country, bring the boogeyman down. Now let's talk about bin Laden being involved in the CIA. I mean, he was like a hero on the news back in the 80s, but now they want you to forget about that. This is MSNBC, though, and this is from August 24th, 1998. Bin Laden comes home to roost. His CIA ties are only the beginning of a woeful story. And it talks about how the CIA funded and created this individual who vacations with the Bush family. There you have it. MSNBC, bin Laden comes home to roost. His CIA ties are only the beginning of a woeful story. Here's one. This is from the San Francisco Chronicle. Al-Qaeda terrorist worked with the FBI right through the 98 embassy bombings of U.S. embassies. And they never even arrested him. And they let him become a U.S. Army sergeant who then went to train Osama bin Laden's bodyguards. Oh, Al-Qaeda terrorist worked with the FBI. Read all the details at Infowars.com. Here's another article out of the Herald Tribune. In 96, Sudan offered to arrest bin Laden and turn over all files of Al-Qaeda preparing terrorist attacks in the U.S. Bill Clinton refused to even take the files or take bin Laden if they would arrest him. Herald Tribune. Here's another one. Taliban. Oh, this is the Taliban this time. Agreed to hand over Osama bin Laden after the 98 embassy bombings. And this is from the London Guardian. Taliban agreed to hand over Osama bin Laden in 1998, and nothing was done. So it's not just the Sudanese. Now it's the Afghans going, hey, blew up your buildings, you fund us, hundreds of millions, we'll arrest him for you. Oh, no, that'll be all right. That doesn't need to happen, Taliban. Bin Laden works for us. And as if the government didn't have prior knowledge, this is Arts Shavaz, and it was also on Fox News later, a big Israeli newspaper, about how there was a full-color 2001 calendar circulating months and months and months before September 11th, where it showed a jumbo jet crashing into the New York skyline, into the World Trade Center towers. And you'll need to go to the website to read the story because the print's kind of small there, but there you can see it. Gets into all that. Here's one from the Times of India. It's an actual reprint out of the BBC. FBI knew of suspects prior to attacks. It talks about how they were training at U.S. military bases and how they were training at private flight schools, and low-level FBI agents tried to do their job and arrest the terrorists and were threatened with being arrested. Again, that's a reprint in the Times of India from the BBC. Here's one from the Los Angeles Times. Watch list didn't get to the airline security. Federal authorities were suspicious of two hijackers, but warning wasn't shared. You read deeper into the article, they'll put you in the watch list if you've been busted with a pound of marijuana before. These guys were known members of Al-Qaeda terrorist network, but the feds, it says, were ordered to keep their names out of the customs computers and the airline computers. So, watch list didn't get to the airline. Oh, but the warning wasn't shared. Though David Shippers, the impeachment lawyer, the guy that brought down the mob in Chicago, was beating on Ashcroft's door, begging him to stop the terrorists with 3 boxes of files, saying to him, they're about to attack any time. We've got to stop them. We've got to stop them now. Why are you threatening these good FBI agents? Why are you threatening defense intelligence officers from the Department of Defense if they stop these terrorists? And Ashcroft, who he knows personally, wouldn't meet with David Shippers. Washington Times, maybe you'll trust this trusted news source. Justice blocked FBI warrant on 2 of the other hijackers up there in Minnesota flight school. Look at that. Washington Times, Justice blocked FBI warrant. Wouldn't let them stop the terrorists. Well, no kidding. The government got triple the funding for anti-terrorism in 1995 after the Oklahoma City bombing with the 1996 Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act, which does nothing to stop terrorists and everything to take your rights away. And the legislation is coming up. And these are the FBI agents David Shippers was representing before the attack, who were threatened with jail if they stopped the CIA-funded and controlled Al-Qaeda terrorists. Here's another one. Judicial Watch, the guys that went after Clinton, highly respected conservatives. The government is lying about the full extent and the source of the anthrax attacks. Judicial Watch. And they quote, this is from October 24th, the September 28th and 29th Wall Street Journal, that Bush gets millions of dollars a year from the bin Laden family, from the Carlyle Group, the big defense contractor. And then Bush is actually on the bin Laden family payroll, both Bushes. And that George Bush, this was in the October 24th Associated Press, was on Cipro, the anthrax-fighting antibiotic, the day of September 11th, 3.5 weeks before anthrax even showed up. And now they're having to admit, it's been in Reuters, that it's a U.S. government strain, U.S. weapons grade, and it looks like somebody inside the U.S. government released it. That came out in Reuters. Somebody in the U.S. envoy to the UN blew the whistle incognito and released more secret documents that have now been released that are on Infowars.com. Just absolutely amazing. But now this kind of gets into conspiracy theory, and I really shouldn't cover this article, but you have a right to know. You know how they have the X-Files, and then after that, they had a couple of pilots for the Lone Gunman on Fox? And we'll show you a little clip of that. as I talk about this. This is from the Fox website. This is a brief synopsis of what the show was about. 3 months before the September 11th attacks. Talk about mass conditioning you. In the show, a secret government group puts a computer on board the aircraft so that they hack into it and they try to fly a jumbo jet into the World Trade Center towers, which is exactly what the government knew the Islamics were planning in Al-Qaeda back in 1995, but with actual hijackers. And we just read that article. So throwing it in your face 3 months before September 11th, Fox Television with the lone gunman. And that was Lone Gunman Pilot 1A EB79 pilot program, where the government is going to hijack a plane with a computer to fly it full of passengers into the World Trade Center tower to get martial law. God. And now I talk about it. Ooh, you heard that on the X-Files. See how they do that preconditioning? Very sophisticated. Here's MSNBC. Alleged hijackers may have trained at U.S. bases. The Pentagon has turned over military records of 5 men to the FBI. Well, it turns out that was confirmed, that 3 men were trained by the Navy at the Pensacola Naval Air Station in a CIA operation. There you have it. Alleged hijackers may have trained at U.S. bases. And then, a few weeks later, that was September 15th, a few weeks later, it comes out in the Pensacola News Journal, highly respected publication. Senator seeks answers on hijackers' ties to Navy base. And in the article, it admits that they were trained at the base right before the terrorist attacks. There you have it. Pensacola News Journal. I mean, this is massive. Here is MSNBC in association with Newsweek. Access denied. FBI agents in Minneapolis weren't given approval to go after the terrorists. If 2 and 2 were put together, could hijackings have been stopped? Ask one investigator. No, let's just give the government triple the funding after the Oklahoma City bombing, which they engineered, and David Shippers is now even saying that, allowed the Islamic terrorists to attack. The Iraqis the government brought in that time, 3,500 of them, now in cells around this country. They wanted to blame that on American patsy to get the police state going against the American people. Again, access denied, ladies and gentlemen. FBI agents were not allowed to stop the terrorist. MSNBC. This is from the Sunday Mail, the third largest mainstream newspaper in England. Bin Laden family linked to Bush in Arbusto Oil, Harkin Energy, Carlyle Group, right up into 2001. Vacationing with the Bin Laden family. Boy, they had this set up a long time ago. Oh, but I guess the former CIA director, George Bush, the blue blood from Kennebunkport, Maine, I guess he wouldn't think anything up like this, would he? That's the Mail, the Sunday Mail, the big newspaper over in England. And again, go read all this at Infowars.com. Here's the Miami Herald. And it says Bin Laden tipped his hand. And it says law enforcement officials were not allowed to stop the terrorist. The FBI knew that Bin Laden associates were taking flying lessons at flight schools around the U.S. and were planning to hijack him and fly him into buildings. French authorities warned them of the actual areas to be attacked, the time that it was going to be attacked, but nothing is going to be done. And this is a Miami Herald posting. It's actually from Knight Ridder News Service. Because of the internet, newspapers will post other people's stories. It's a little confusing, but it's all in the government prior knowledge section of Infowars.com. Oh, here's an interesting one from the BBC. Bush took FBI agents off the Bin Laden family trail. And again, I suggest you read this whole article. Don't believe me, just go read it. And I actually interviewed the BBC reporter. I actually interviewed David Shippers, and all that is coming out in a more in-depth film to be released in early 2002. It just takes too much time to produce a high production value documentary. This is just a special intelligence report for you with all the documentation. Please get it out to police, sheriffs, military people, opinion makers. They're not bad, but they're using this horrible terrorist attack to corral them into more control. We'll get to the details of that a little bit later. Bush took FBI agents off the bin Laden family trail. London, America, was itself to blame for the events of September 11th because the U.S. administration was using kid gloves and tracking down Osama bin Laden and other fanatics linked to Saudi Arabia. A special BBC investigation has reported in a damning indictment of the two President Bushes and American foreign policy. Excuse me. The report, which the BBC aired, based on a secret FBI document, now made public, by the way, numbered 199I WF2I 3589 and emanating out of the FBI's Washington field office of the American establishment and connections between the CIA and Saudi Arabia and the Bushmen and the bin Ladens may have been the real cause of the deaths of thousands of the World Trade Center attacks. BBC. And it just goes on and on. They're all in business together. Bush funded the terrorists. I mean, come on, ladies and gentlemen. Come on. Bush took FBI agents off the bin Laden family trail. 2 months. 2 months before. 2 months, ladies and gentlemen. Unbelievable. Think about that. Think about that out there. Here's Gregory Palast, who, again, I interviewed with his even more in-depth reporting from the BBC. FBI and U.S. spy agents say Bush spiked bin Laden probe right before September 11th and gets into more detail. By the way, you know where this secret document came from and why the Bush crime family and the CIA and their little puppet Bill Clinton, those guys are all in bed together? You know why the big CFR takeover isn't going to work? You know why? Because there's good FBI agents and good people in defense intelligence and many other agencies, and more documents are getting released by the day, and they're panicking. You can see it on their faces. Bush telling us to shut up. Ashcroft implying we're terrorists if we expose this. No, you're the terrorist. You're the phony conservative, Ashcroft. We're the real conservatives that care about this country. FBI and U.S. spy agents say Bush spiked bin Laden probes before September 11th. Because remember, before September 11th, the FBI, inside the channels, tried to stop the terrorists, and they're about to attack. Here's the plans. Here's the hijackers. Why is the federal government funding them? Why are you training them at U.S. military bases? We've intercepted the phone calls. We've got the records. Bush threatened to have them arrested. FBI agents, defense intelligence. And so what did they do? I've actually talked to some of these FBI agents and defense intelligence in person. I just can't reveal their names, obviously. Lawsuits are forthcoming through David Shippers, former impeachment lawyer that went against Clinton. Okay? This is such incredible magnitude. How does it get any more insane? Well, before, they didn't release secret documents. Now the FBI and defense intelligence are leaking secret documents to the foreign press. They leaked these documents to the U.S. government. They leaked these documents to everybody else, to all the media. You won't hear a word one about it, except maybe the Washington Times. Now, I want you to think about that. And we have the actual copy of it. It's now public, posted on the website, the actual document where Bush, 2 months before the attack, told FBI agents, you'll be arrested. Anyone will be arrested stopping bin Laden's terrorists. Unbelievable. Bush, you thought everybody was as evil and phony and two-faced as you? You thought they were all evil up there with you? In your dirty ivory tower, you're really getting delusional. So there it is for you, ladies and gentlemen. FBI and U.S. spy agents say Bush spiked bin Laden probes before September 11th. Here's another one from Anamova, big newspaper over there. U.S. agents told to back off bin Laden's. Another article for you. Here's another one, Los Angeles Times. Officials told of major assault plans. Authorities were advised in August that as many as 200 terrorists were preparing to attack and hijack aircraft and attack lower Manhattan as well as landmarks in D.C., and nothing was done. Los Angeles Times, ladies and gentlemen. Los Angeles Times. FBI ignored leads. BDC. No, they didn't ignore them. They'd be arrested if they stopped the terrorist. Bush paid for this. This whole operation was run. This was first reported in Le Figaro, one of the big newspapers over in France, and reported by national French radio and television, then picked up by the BBC. Figaro reported that CIA agents met with Osama bin Laden in a Gulf hospital as early as last July, from July 4th to July 14th, and gave them precise information about imminent attacks on the United States. Bin Laden was being nursed back to health at the U.S. military hospital in Pakistan by his doctors and CIA attendants. French Secret Service report, publicly put out on September 7th, warned of possible attacks and order that would come out of Afghanistan. Le Figaro reports very precise information on targets for the attack was communicated to the CIA. CIA met with bin Laden in July. Again, in your face. Report, bin Laden treated at U.S. hospital and met with the CIA for 10 days. The Washington Times. In your face. And it gets into how the French had newspaper reports about the U.S. going to be attacked in New York. Telling them it's coming up in a few days. We're warning you. You're doing nothing. No, the FBI, on orders, had the names of Al-Qaeda taken out of the customs computers and taken out of the airport computers. I mean, I just read that 20 stories back, and I better hurry or we won't get to all this in 2 hours. Does this not alter your worldview forever, my friends? I tell you, I feel like I'm down in a deep pit, but by knowing this information, we're able to empower ourselves and counter this garbage. Bin Laden underwent treatment in July at Dubai American Hospital. Reports confirmed. Again, in your face, ladies and gentlemen. This is Yahoo posting an Associated Press report. Bush thwarted FBI probe against bin Laden's. And again, why would Bush do this? To get control, to get a 90% approval rating, to get the UN to be able to take over the Central Asian oil supply in Afghanistan, the second largest in the world, the biggest opium producer in the world, 2/3 of poppies production there. And now there's a UN government. 3 months after the attack, there's a United Nations government. And more terrorism's coming. The government's got more terrorism planned. They ratchet up the control. 95, triple the anti-terrorism funding. Close the noose around the American people's necks. 2001, another attack. Tighten it up even more. And now they're saying they're going to get $1.5 trillion. The gross domestic product of the United States, broken up over 5 years, 1/5 the U.S. economy. That's even bigger than Hillary Clinton's socialized health care scam that was 1/7 the U.S. economy. So again, ladies and gentlemen, it's in your face. Bush started FBI probe against bin Laden's. This is the Hindustan Times. FBI thwarted FBI probe against bin Laden's. All right. Did bin Laden have help from U.S. friends? And then the Toronto Star, the biggest newspaper, most respected in Canada, does a huge report, a multi-series, multi-part report, and it lists the Bush regime's attitude towards the Taliban, how they funded them with $132 million, how they protected the terrorist, how they shepherded the terrorist, how they knew of the attack, and how they let it happen. The Toronto Star. The Toronto Star, ladies and gentlemen. And it says, did bin Laden have help from the U.S.? And you read the article, and it states the facts. You know, Bush has been talking about how they've seized all these banks and how they're stopping bin Laden. But I got a New York Post article, as well as an MSNBC, posted in the government prior knowledge section of Infowars.com. It's all right there for you, mainstream. Where Chase Manhattan, Citibank, and American Express are still laundering money for them as of late 2001. Bin Laden owns stake in Massachusetts biological firm. And it says the firm can produce biological weapons. Boston Herald, September 25th. And I checked it out this week before I did this special report. They still haven't taken it away from him. I mean, bin Laden's own stake in Massachusetts biological firm. But they'll bomb an aspirin factory in '98 because Sudan offers to turn over bin Laden. Miami Herald, police leaders say FBI withholding intelligence, not allowing them to stop other terrorists operating in the country. There's more of these Al-Qaeda teams here. That's why government agents are finally having to release secret documents to expose Bush and the whole New World Order takeover. This whole thing's a pretext for that. Air Force officers seethe over the ones that got away. Plane had enemies in sight, but were not allowed to fire. The Washington Post reposted in the San Francisco Chronicle. As many as 10 times over the last 6 weeks, the Air Force had top Taliban al-Qaeda in its crosshairs in Afghanistan, but was unable to receive clearance. The CIA stopped them. Same story. Air Force officers seethe over the ones that got away. Here's that October 24th AP story that I referenced out of a Judicial Watch article. Highly respected conservatives now exposing Bush. Bush on Cipro, it says in the body of the article, with his entire cabinet, the anthrax-fighting antibiotic, the day of September 11th, 3.5 weeks before any of this popped up. And there is the October 24th Associated Press article for you and in your face, ladies and gentlemen. Also, Syrians flood flight schools. WorldNet Daily, 14-man teams entering from Syria after the September 11th attacks. And the INS and the flight school got concerned in Fort Worth when they knew before the INS and the flight schools did that the flight bans on civilian training in flight simulators was going to be lifted. They knew classified information before the flight schools and the INS did. They called the FBI, and the FBI said do nothing in the article. And then after this article was in the Dallas Morning News and the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, that 14-man team started flying in from Algeria, another listed sponsor of terror, just like Syria. Here it is, ladies and gentlemen. Syrians flood flight schools, 14-man teams entering. Whole bunch of articles on that. That concludes our government prior knowledge section. And they are panicking over all this coming out. I had about 100 other articles. We just can't fit them in all here. The more extensive film coming out soon with higher production value is about to come out. But this is part 1 of 911, The Road to Tyranny. Now the show's not over. The information war is not over with the facts. We're going to get into the police-state cashless society and what they stand to gain out of all of this. Then we're going to get into the martial law and world government with their own words, saying that this is empowering world government. Then we're going to get into how they're leaving the borders wide open and have less Border Patrol guards than they did, but are telling us as Americans to carry national ID cards and give up our liberties, give up our freedoms. Amazing. And how the communist Chinese government is taking over the Massachusetts Port Authority. They already have the Panama Canal. The communist Chinese government can have our ports and run them and have their troops running them. But we shouldn't be able to own guns. And then we'll get back into how the government planned all this in the past and how we have the actual secret government documents now released by someone inside the government. And the government admits these are real. We have a link to the National Security Archives on Infowars.com. It's all there. Please take time out to check it out for yourself. Your family's future, safety is on the line that you get involved and spread this vital information. I mean, I know it just goes on and on. I know it never ends. I understand that. Before we get into police state and cashless society, let's go ahead and get into the USA Patriot Act. One of the nightmare pieces of legislation they've already passed. Let's just cover this a little bit for you. And it's getting worse and worse. They've got more legislation being rammed through right now. They have abolished at least 3 parts, maybe 4, of the amendments to the Constitution. It's amazing. It is H.R. 3162. H.R. 3162. Before we get into police state and cashless society, let's go ahead and get into the USA Patriot Act. One of the nightmare pieces of legislation they've already passed. Let's just cover this a little bit for you. And it's getting worse and worse. They've got more legislation being rammed through right now. They have abolished at least 3 parts, maybe 4, of the amendments to the Constitution. It's amazing. It is H.R. 3162. H.R. 3162. USA Patriot Act. Let's go to the USA Patriot Act. On Infowars.com, I actually have saved the USA Patriot Act. Orwellian name, if I ever heard one, takes all the freedoms, or attempts to. It's up to us if we give them up. Bill of Rights doesn't give us our freedoms. It simply points them out. It enumerates them. And they call it the USA Patriot Act. How Orwellian is that? It's the opposite of freedom. But they call it USA Patriot Act. See, I love America. And I'm not going to let America die. That flag symbolizes freedom and strength and sovereignty and real national security. Not a bunch of terrorist problem reaction solution experts pulling the rug out from under the American people and then saying, we'll be your masters and keep you safe, slaves. H.R. 3162, the USA Patriot Act. Let's go through some of the subsections. First off, you probably heard that it was sunsetted. You know, Bob Barr got up there on TV and said, this is a terrible bill. The only debate was whether to abolish the Constitution for 4 years or 5. Well, funny, you read Section 224 of H.R. 3162, and it clearly states, my friends, that there is no sunset for Section 203A, 203C, right through Section 222 and other sections not listed, whatever that means. So, again, Section 224, sunset. There is no sunset. Congress wasn't even allowed to read this bill. We'll get to news articles on that a little bit later. Congress wasn't allowed to read a bill, so read the sunset section. There is no sunset. But that's okay, because it only deals with foreign terrorists that wear turbans and have big beards, right? Let's read the definition of domestic terrorism of H.R. 3162. Section 802, paragraph A. Domestic terrorism is defined as involve acts dangerous to human life that are a violation of the criminal laws of the United States or of any state. Section 802, H.R. 3162. Again, there is the section. Go to Infowars.com. Look at it for yourself. All right, let's go ahead now and go to Section 213, one of the ones you might have heard about. Authority for delaying notice of the execution of a warrant. And it talks about secret, warrantless searches, breaking into your house when you're not there without a warrant, taking whatever they want, and not even telling you they were there. By the way, I've now spent about 10 hours reading this bill. It's 1,016 sections. I found about 50 that gut the Constitution and Bill of Rights. I can't read 10,000 pages. You go read the bill for yourself and get ready to get a barf bag out. I can't spend more than 10 hours on it. The more I dig, the more nightmares I find, ladies and gentlemen. So there you have it, warrantless secret searches. They got stuff for secret tribunals for terrorists, and the definition of a terrorist is anybody that does anything. I mean, you name it. You do anything. You jaywalk, you get in a bar fight, you shoot your gun inside the city limits. You are a terrorist, can be extradited to a foreign country and tried secretly in a foreign country and executed in a foreign country. Go read the subsections. Oh, but don't worry, they give us anti-terrorism forfeiture protection in Section 316. Oh, really? It says you have a right to contest having all your assets seized at the time that you're accused of being a terrorist. Oh, really? No judge, no jury, you just have it seized, unless it's under supplemental rules for certain admiralty and maritime claims. You look up admiralty and maritime, that is martial law. We'll get to mainstream news articles saying that a little bit later if you don't believe me. And I mean, it just goes on, just section after section after section. I'm not even going to read any more of it. I mean, if you won't go check this out, if you don't care about your family out there, I feel sorry for you. Bottom line. That's why we're putting out this emergency report, and I thank those that have gotten the film. If you're watching this, if a friend or a family member gave you this film, you ought to thank them for taking the time out to do it, because people are authorized to make copies of this emergency report and spread it to the, 4 winds. I want everybody to have this. because we can affect change. Bush is in trouble. All that government prior knowledge. He's had to respond at the UN and tell us to shut up. And now Ashcroft's doing it. Amazing. Now you've seen the USA Patriot Act, and there's stuff even worse they're trying to pass on December 7th as we tape this emergency broadcast. Here's a small portion of what they've gotten rammed through since September 11th. Let's start with this. I find this particularly revealing, and the Washington Times has reported on this, but we have an actual copy of it. If you encounter any of the following, call the Joint Terrorism Task Force. What are they doing? They're teaching police, not that Islamics with, trying to hijack planes. That's not a problem. Remember the guy in Chicago had the same address as the hijackers in Chicago? And they find him with 2 knives. And, oh, my gosh, your name's Abdullah. We got to let you right on board the plane. And they stopped him with another search that the stewardesses demanded, or the flight attendants, politically correct, and found 7 knives, a taser gun, as well as mace. Well, nowhere in this new flyer the FBI is putting out nationwide to police departments everywhere does it say anything about people like that, or foreigners, or illegal aliens. No, it says people who make frequent references to the U.S. Constitution. And people who say they are defenders of the U.S. Constitution, it says if you encounter any of the following, call the Joint Terrorism Task Force. Now, are we living in the twilight zone here? This is like Red Dawn. They've taken over, they had used a crisis to get control, and they're putting out flyers to all the local police departments and sheriff's departments saying that the American people that rally behind the flag and what America stands for and what that flag symbolizes and what those veterans fought and died for when you drive by the cemetery with all those little white crosses. Now, does that not blow you away out there? I mean, right here, call a member of the Phoenix FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. This thing's gone out nationwide. Investigator Al Shearer, Maricopa County Attorney's Office, 602-650-3131. Federal Bureau of Investigation, 602-650-3163. That's 602-650-3163. Now, that's the FBI. And look at it. This was a color flyer. We have it scanned on the net, so it's black and white. And you open the thing up, and that's what it says. Right here, it says, make frequent references to the U.S. Constitution. Over here, it says, U.S. Defenders of the Constitution. This is on my website, by the way. You can go read it. And it's been in the Washington Times. They wrote a story about this. I mean, this is what they're doing. This is what they're using, the hysteria over terrorism, to get people rolling to do. See, wars, outside threats, get people in line. And so they're getting local police in line. They've said they're going to federalize local police. And this is what they're doing. And I predicted all this in past films, in past live TV shows. July 25th on my local Austin show. In fact, we'll show a clip of that right now, and then we'll come back and get to all the government prior knowledge. We'll just hurry through this and then get into the police state section. Then we'll get into the martial law section and much more. So just stay with us, ladies and gentlemen. There's just too much evidence. We'll be right back. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so glad that you could join us today for this Wednesday, July 25th, 2001 broadcast. Tyranny is enveloping the globe, and the United States is a shining jewel the globalists want to bring down, and they will use terrorism as the pretext to get it done. So that's coming up in the second half of the show. Very important information. I'm going to put the call out that you call the White House and tell them, look, we've seen the news stories that you've wanted to blow things up, that you have blown things up, and that you're saying that 4 million of us are going to die and we need martial law and the Associated Press at one of your little drills you had, and that we're aware of who the terrorists are if you pull this. This can stop this Hitlerian Reichstag event. There's a problem, folks. The government is now using that here with Oklahoma City and the World Trade Center, which we have proven in documentaries I've made General Benton Parton, former head of Air Force Weapons Development, Dr. Frederick Whitehurst, former head of the FBI Crime Lab, Hoppy Heidelberg, head grand juror of the Oklahoma City grand jury, threatened at his home by the FBI at gunpoint to shut up about the government doing it. The list goes on and on. The seismograph experts at the University of Oklahoma who got the 2 bombing, the feds not releasing the 12 surveillance camera tapes that they had of the so-called truck bomb, the columns being sheared off at the bottom with black blast points from plastic explosives, the rebar disintegrated, pieces of the building blown out across the street, Clinton's approval rating at 32%, 80%, 78% a month after the bombing, the Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act passed, basically abolishing the Bill of Rights, creating 60 new federal offenses, reasons to execute you, doubling the size of the FBI and BATF, blaming Christians and conservatives and libertarians with the bombing, and Clinton even blaming talk radio. Why did Hitler burn the Reichstag? Well, he had been elected chancellor, but he wasn't president. To become Fuhrer and to abolish the presidency, to make himself lord of the upper and lower houses of parliament in the Reichstag, he firebombed it. They grabbed a poor, mentally retarded Jewish homeless man off the street, summarily convicted him, executed him, and declared martial law. Now, don't tell me we're not in this system already. I want to put the toll-free number up for Congress. And I won't want you to believe Alex Jones. I want you to go get these news stories off my website. I want you to call these major newspapers. I want you to find out these statements were true by the White House about preparing for martial law. And I want you to let them know that if there is any terrorism, we know who to blame. It's like having a convicted child molester next door to you and your son or daughter gets raped. You know who to check with first. You wanted to blow up airliners. You let the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor. We now have the communiques that prove it. You knew the bombing date and tied the ships together in neat little rows. That's even on the History Channel. We have the documents from the government. You bombed Oklahoma City. You bombed the World Trade Center. That's even been in the New York Times, October 28th, 93. So one of your informants went public and recorded the FBI telling them to build the bomb and let the bombing go forward. They were fearing for their lives, so they recorded the FBI, the head FBI agent in New York, telling him to do it. This is to corral you and to control you. Truth is stranger than fiction. This is their main paradigm in history. You don't promote terrorists. You don't advertise them. You don't advertise your weaknesses. You don't talk about how you're wide open. That's how they start out here. We'll collapse. We'll have disintegration. 4 million dead. We're wide open. Yeah, and what are you doing? Don't search those trucks coming over the border. Open the southern and northern border. Give the Chinese military Long Beach Naval Base. Do all this. You know why? They control Mexico. The globalists control China. It's even on the History Channel now, but I've reported documents that Mao was funded and given the weapons, and Czech wasn't. They wanted communism in there. The point is, if any terrorism comes, it's from this government. And if there was an outside threat like a bin Laden, who was a known CIA asset in the 80s, running the Mujahideen war, and whose family builds all the military bases over in Saudi Arabia right now, and sits on the board of Iridium Satellite. He's the boogeyman they need in this Orwellian phony system. U.S. lawmakers warned of dark winter in case of bioterrorist attack. A chilling scenario of possible national collapse was presented Monday. U.S. lawmakers by a group of prominent security experts who warned that a biological terrorist attack on U.S. soil could bring the country to the brink of disintegration. The panel, which included former Deputy Secretary of Defense John Harm, Oklahoma governor, and one of the architects of the Oklahoma City building bombing, Frank Keating, his brother wrote The Final Jihad 3 years before the bombing, where this is amazing. Where a Ted McVeigh bombs the Murrah building. God, Keating, how'd you know that? I have a copy. I went to the bookstore. Oh, it's out of print. You'll have to get it from somebody else. The Final Jihad. Keating, how'd your brother write that book? I got so much evidence. And in the start of the book, it says, I honor this to the Knights of the Secret Circle. Oh. A chilling scenario. The panel, which included former Deputy Secretary of Defense John Harm, Oklahoma Governor Frank Keating, former FBI agent, and former Senator Sam Nunn, presented their conclusions after holding a two-day exercise codenamed Dark Winter, which featured a computer-simulated bioterrorist attack on 3 U.S. cities. Again, governors, congressmen and women, senators, FBI people, local police, all here for this fear fest. Give up your rights. Ladies and gentlemen, they wanted to blow up airlines, kill Americans, bomb Washington for a pretext to invade Cuba. That's in the Baltimore Sun. They bombed Oklahoma City. They bombed the World Trade Center. That's proven. They stand to gain. They get the power. It's not our government. It's an occupational government. It's not the Constitution that failed. It's us that failed. We that failed the Constitution. I want the White House numbers up there now. A big part of this solution, after you research all the government terrorism and check out what I'm saying is true, call the White House and tell them, we know the government's planning terrorism. We know Oklahoma City and World Trade Center was terrorism. We know the Joint Chiefs of Staff wanted to blow up airliners, Baltimore Sun. If you do it, we're going to blame you because we know who's up to it. Or if you let some terrorist group do it, like the World Trade Center, we know who to blame. And you could save the planet. I'm calling it Operation Expose the Government Terrorist. Because now they're going from killing 160 people at Oklahoma City and 81 at Waco and a couple dozen injuring 1,000 at the World Trade Center to saying 1 to 4 million. Associated Press. Call the White House, tell them, we're not going to put up with government terrorism. We know the government's behind all this stuff. We have the evidence. Fax them, write them. In fact, throw it back up, Mike. That is so important. Thanks for putting that up there. And if you missed the numbers, they're on Infowars.com. Let's take another call. So important to call the White House, to call your congressmen and women, and let them know we're aware of their terrorist paradigm to control us. We'll throw that number up one more time and then put up the slate at the end of the show. I appreciate everybody out there. We'll probably be back next week from 4:30 to 7 here on Channel 10. Please wake up as many people as you can and resist it. You have the power, but you have to get off the bench. And don't believe what I'm saying. Don't pass on rumors. Get the documents for yourself. Become an effective person. You have power, but you've got to be effective. God bless you. I'll see you tonight, 9 o'clock on the radio, Infowars.com. You may be asking yourself, why is this guy so excited? Why is he so upset? Well, if you're not upset about the information we just covered, and if you're not going to verify it for yourself, you've got a serious problem. You cannot deny this information out of hand. You are compelled to go check it out for yourself. I mean, the FBI putting out flyers nationwide saying that if you encounter people who make frequent references to the U.S. Constitution or who say that they will defend the U.S. Constitution, that they're terrorists, call the terrorism hotline. That's what you'd expect to hear of, the KGB was running the U.S. or something. And the Bush administration is continuing every Clinton policy. And he's got a 90% approval rating, which is a fraud, of course. The people supposedly love their new Fuhrer. That's what problem, reaction, solution. That's what government terrorism throughout history, from Hitler burning the Reichstag to Pearl Harbor. We haven't even mentioned how Pearl Harbor, it's now even on the History Channel, that Roosevelt knew the actual date the Japanese were going to attack a week before. The actual documents have been declassified. It's the same thing. Is that saying that the Japanese are good or that bin Laden's good? No. But at least in the case of the Japanese, it was a real foreign enemy. The government just had prior knowledge and allowed it to happen to get the U.S. unified and into World War II. In the case of bin Laden, he's a known CIA asset until the 1980s, and the government funded, protected, trained, shepherded the terrorist, had prior knowledge, and allowed them to attack. Amazing. So they're not worried about the borders being wide open. The communist Chinese in the Panama Canal and now running the Massachusetts Port Authority. No. It's about disarming you. It's about national ID cards. It's about saying that if you love the country and know what the country stands for, you're a terrorist. No, anybody that really believes this FBI flyer is the real terrorist. What did the Founding Fathers say? Those that are enemies of the U.S. Constitution are traitors, are dangerous, should be dealt with, are enemies. You see, we know what America is, and we're not going to shut up. And our numbers are growing. Tens of millions of Americans, black, white, old, young, it doesn't matter. We're waking up. So let's get into what the government's getting out of it. You saw the government prior knowledge, funding and training of the terrorists. Seizing dictatorial power. It's not just Alex Jones. It's William Safire, one of the #1 columnists at the New York Times, a conservative, seizing dictatorial power. And now it says that Bush is a dictator, and that these laws have to do with American people, not just illegal aliens. The New York Times, William Safire, seizing dictatorial power. We will continue. Vast quarantine role advocated for states. It's a whole other broadcast, but the evidence is the U.S. government's doing this to get the pretext for control of the anthrax and may try to blame it on the American people. Though we're kind of backing them into a corner on the radio, countering them, they're kind of backing off from that now. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. Vast quarantine role advocated for the states. Detroit Free Press. Plan would let agencies shut roads, cities during a biological terror attack. In the event of a bioterrorist attack using a deadly contagious disease such as smallpox, public health officials want to be able to close roads, airports, herd people into stadiums, and if necessary, quarantine entire infected cities. And I actually interviewed Mr. Gostin on my syndicated radio program. Well, here he is in the Detroit Free Press with the federal government. Would a National Guardsman, he asked, shoot a grandmother? Shoot a grandmother. They're discussing this now, getting us used to it. Shoot a grandmother trying to evade quarantine. Maybe, Gostin said, you have to use all reasonable force. Sometimes, he added, that could mean lethal force. Continuing. Expert federal law needed on smallpox for forced vaccination of the entire population. Time magazine, the case for a national ID card in the wake of the terrorist attack. It's not very American, says Rick Stingle, but it's not a bad idea, which tracks what you buy and sell. By the way, it's December 7th when we tape this show, the special emergency broadcast. And I want you to know that as I walked in here, it was on ABC News before I taped this, that Argentina, after the IMF imploded their economy, just got done outlawing cash 3 years after they put the thumb scanners in, which are now going in U.S. banks, grocery stores, rental car places, and in 100-plus school districts. I have the Washington Post article in the biometric section of Infowars.com. In 100-plus school districts, public school, government training camp school districts, they now force children to thumb scan biometrically to get their food. No cash allowed. Training them for the cashless society and getting them into the database. Security panel seeks national ID cards. Associated Press, Albany, New York. President Bush's committee, he is in panel, recommends a mandatory national identification card with all your information on it. What you have in the bank? Everything. Associated Press. George Bush wants it. And the liberals love it too. This is the WashTech, the Washington Post bi-weekly magazine. This is an article. States devising plan for high-tech national identification card. Then they admit the states are bragging. We already face scan and thumb scan in most states, 38 of them. In the wake, all the other states that resisted are going along with it now. Face scanning, digital photo, digital thumbprint, to then get you into the cashless society database. But they claim it's to stop the terrorist. But remember, the government funded and aided and protected the terrorist. States devising plan for high-tech national identification card. I told you years ago in my first film, America Destroyed by Design, where I protested down at the DMV, state police, and got arrested, showed the executive orders. They're going to start urine and blood testing to get driver's license. They're already thumb scanning and face scanning. And I told you all this would happen in the name of fighting terrorism. And I told you the states already had implemented it. I showed the executive order. You say you'll never take a national identification card? In 38 states, it's in your back pocket. And by the time you see this film, many other states are passing it right now. Oh, but that's okay. Because in the aftermath of the attacks, torture seeps into the discussion by the news media. Jim Ruttenberg, and there's hundreds of these articles, the New York Times business section. In many quarters, the Newsweek columnist Jonathan Alter is considered a liberal. Yet there he was last week raising the question. In the autumn of his anger, he wrote, even a liberal can find his thoughts turning to cattle prods or rubber hoses. And then it gets into how we need torture. Turning into the Taliban to fight the Taliban when the CIA's been training people at the School of Americas in Fort Benning, Georgia to torture for 50 years. They're now training police how to torture you. It's in law enforcement magazines. None of this has to do with terrorism. You've heard their definition of terrorism. Defenders of the U.S. Constitution. All right. You want it, you're going to get it. U.S. now might have to consider what was once unthinkable. The liberal Alan Dershowitz says, the Post-Dispatch. He calls for torture warrants, national ID cards, where even private security workers could come in your home and demand to see it. By the way, in the USA Patriot Act, they have a subsection where Pinkerton and Wackenhut will be able to break in your house without warrants and rob you. I mean, oh, and it's the Pinkertons that helped kill, squatters out west and strikers back east. And it was, Pinkerton at the Pinkerton Massacre, burning down and killing women and children, made Waco look like a tea party in Colorado. And now they get to do that. And Alan Dershowitz says it's great. U.S. might now have to consider, now it's on the website if you can't read it, torture. Or we'll put it up, the computer screen up there on the screen for you. Media-stoked debate on torture as a U.S. option. Another article, government proposes new rule, eavesdropping on phone calls between lawyers and clients in terrorist probe. And then you read the new Justice Department proposal, which they've now implemented. It's for everybody. And this is out of the Associated Press as well. In your face. Now remember, before the terrorist attack, people were mad about all of these intrusions. They were angry that they were being face scanned in England, that if you hadn't paid your taxes, you couldn't go into stores. The alarms would go off. You weren't allowed to buy or sell. At the Super Bowl in 2001, I'm sure a lot of you heard about this, they face scanned everyone. It can scan your face and then compare it to 1 billion faces in a single second. You'll say, what do you have to hide? That's what Hitler said. And again, already in England, if you haven't gone along, your car doesn't start, they're putting satellite kill switches in the cars, you haven't paid your taxes. That's where all this cashless society is going. Think of all the control. They'll know what you buy. They'll know what you do. Where's the Fifth Amendment? Where's the Fourth Amendment? Anger over face scanning cameras. BBC, August 20th, long before September 11th, 2001. Anger at the Super Bowl. See the picture of the Super Bowl there in Tampa. Here's from the Virginia Beach pilot. Beach mayor opposes plan to put up face scanning cameras. We have these very cameras going up in Austin after September 11th. But this was from July 10th. The mayor was angry about it, said we're not going to do it. It treats everyone as if they're guilty until proven innocent. Beach mayor opposes plan to scan faces. These very cameras have gone up the town where I live now. Well, guess what happened after September 11th? November 13th, 2001. Facial recognition technology approved at Virginia Beach in the wake of the terrorist attacks. And the police chief says, well, you shouldn't complain unless you have something to hide. Oh, we heard that from the Nazis, didn't we? See how the terrorist attack helps the New World Order? See how it helps them get the cashless society in? Argentina, first country, December 7th, to ban cash, to not let you withdraw your cash, to make you take a national ID card and thumb scan each time you use it. And they already put the thumb scanners in 3 years ago like it was this fun, new, hip thing. And it's happening in the U.S. now. Florida City moves to ban face recognition system. USA Today. I had the city councilwoman on leading the charge. A listener of my radio program. I'm on an AM station there. And what happened? In the wake of the attacks, her proposal is not passing. Borders Books is watching you. High-tech surveillance, the kind used to catch terrorists, will be spying on shoppers. Borders Books putting face scanners in. How do they know who you are, though? What do they match your face to? Your driver's license digital photo. Surveillance tool, from Big Brother to safety tool. The New York Times, face scanning cameras going up nationwide in wake of the attacks. Yeah, we called the Public Works here in Austin, Texas. They started putting them up the week of the September 11th attack, and we said, the face scanning cameras, and we said, boy, did you already have those cameras? They go, yeah, we had hundreds of them already in a warehouse for 6 months. We were given the order to go ahead and put them up now. Yeah, that's Austin, Texas. Look at that. Face scanning, ladies and gentlemen. Face scanning cameras going up in Austin. And there I am out there pointing them out to the people in Austin. That is about 300 yards from my home, what I was just showing you earlier. And then it's interspersed with some clips Mike got from the same system in England they put in 5 years ago. Now you haven't paid your taxes, can't walk down the street. Your new cars won't start. You have to thumb scan to start them. Satellite kill switches in them. And there I was 4 years ago protesting down at the DMV and being arrested. Here it is, the U.S. Car spy punishes privacy limit. ZDNet News. People speeding in rent cars over 1 mile an hour were given $450 speeding fines by the Acme Rent-A-Car. You see? And this is already the law in England. All new cars have the satellite kill switches in them. Haven't done anything wrong, but you're treated like a criminal. No thumbprint, no rental car. This is in the U.S., by the way, that I just showed you. This is from Wired News in the U.S. Their former editor, who has his own magazine now, was in New Mexico and was traveling to Oakland, California, tried to get a rent car at Dollar Rent-A-Car, and they're putting him in nationwide, no digital thumb scan, no rent car. And he asked him, how do you know what my thumbprint is? From the driver's license facility. Cashless society. 3 years after Argentina put it in, the IMF bankrupted them December 7th, and they went all cashless. Total debtor slaves now. No thumbprint, no rental car. Government eavesdropping on phone calls between lawyers and clients. The Associated Press. Health and Human Services set to order smallpox vaccine for all Americans, and the military will force you to take it. Funny, before this happened, I had articles where the military was training. The military was being trained to go help the kids get their vaccinations in Illinois and New York and California schools. Isn't that interesting? They had the troops training to give vaccines to the people years ago, and now it may be mandatory because they love us. Then I've got a whole stack of news articles we won't get to in this film, but it's out there for you, where they're putting cancer viruses in the vaccines. Why do you think cancer's up 400%? The UN has said they want to reduce world population by 80%. They want us out of the way, folks. Here's Insight Magazine, a division of the Washington Times. Emergency is a pretext was the cover of the magazine, with a nice man in a black ski mask on the cover. This is a print article off the web from that police state. And Congressman Ron Paul says none of them were allowed to read the USA Patriot Act. We're told to pass it or else. He voted no. One of only a dozen or so people, a good Republican from right here in Texas, who's now saying at the end of the article, Ron Paul, Air Force flight surgeon, highly decorated, multiply elected congressman. He says, our founding fathers would think it's time for a revolution. This is why they revolted in the first place, says Paul, with a laugh. They revolted against much more mild oppression. Under the UN gavel, the Washington Post, admitting the UN Criminal Court now controls the U.S., even though it hasn't been ratified. There are no juries. You cannot face your accusers. They can hold you indefinitely. Under the UN gavel, the Washington Post. You ought to read that story. Loss of rights feared if Bush security moves. Lawmakers say courts, Congress bypassed. San Francisco Chronicle reposted from the New York Times. Anti-terror bill damned for catch-all powers. London Guardian. Suspected terrorist will not see evidence, will be tried in foreign countries if need be for the safety of the court, and can be executed in secret. The Sunday Times of London. Again, these are all on Infowars.com, saved for you right there to go read for yourself. And then don't believe me, call the newspaper, ask them where they wrote this. Go to their website, read their archives. Terrorizing the Bill of Rights. The Village Voice, now a liberal publication, telling you the same thing. And now, as if you can't handle any more, as if it's gotten too bizarre, martial law, militarization, concentration camp coming up for you. That's coming up. As if you can't handle any more of this. Digital Angel product launch scheduled for November 26. And they have this scheduled for several years in consortium with a defense contractor. What is Digital Angel? It is an implantable microchip run off the body's own heat, which is boosted by cell towers to satellites. This is from Bloomberg Financial, the #1 name in financial news. Mainstream. I have Fox News. I have the Associated Press. All that's on my website. And I have a link to their website, Implantable Microchips, a link to Digital Solutions website, and that little angel, more like a little devil. And they're now advertising it, and people are taking microchips in South Florida. Initial marketing campaigns will focus on South Florida with its high concentration of favorable demographic groups, elderly. Here is the Army website, Army.mil, folks, saying that we will accept brain chips in the near future. The population, implantable microchip. I also have a Federation of American Scientists saying it. Implantable microchip. Why the implantable microchip? Ethical and public relations issues. The entire population will accept the brain chip. They use a word we can understand by 2025, and it's already rolled out. Unbelievable. U.S. gun rights under foreign UN attack. Constitution anti-gun activists would like to have the UN meddle with the Second Amendment rights. This was from July 15th. They were meeting July 4th to say they want our guns. Unbelievable. And since the attacks, they're demanding we have national registration. There you have it. The Baltimore Sun, under foreign attack, your gun rights. Anti-terrorism bill threatens civil liberties, experts say. A military secret no longer. Classified U.S. test 30 years ago exposed thousands of sailors to chemical and biological weapons. Hartford Courant, also Chicago Tribune. In conjunction, they sprayed San Francisco with a deadly weapon in '68. Deaths resulted. Details remain classified. This is your loving government. And now, as if all of this police state news isn't scary enough, London Guardian, Hollywood afraid of losing the plots. Hollywood has assembled a war cabinet in response to requests from the White House to help. But tensions are emerging with some entertainment industry members unhappy that they may appear to be acting as a government operative. Where did this article come from? The London Guardian, highly respected. But maybe you don't believe that. Well, here's Variety. Then we'll get to the Associated Press. White House summons biz chieftains. You read it. It says Karl Rove, White House Chief of Staff, meets with the heads of all of Hollywood and the television to say that nothing will be made that puts the government in a bad light. White House summons biz chieftains. It's happening, folks. It's happening. Hollywood to give a boost to U.S. government image in movies. Los Angeles, Associated Press. But that's okay, because we used to have 1.3 million in prison 2 years ago. Now it's 6.5 million. And what do? They let the violent offenders out, keep the nonviolent in, the violent attack people, and you hear, we got to have more prisons, we got to have more prisons. We have more than Russia does. 6.5 million. World record. Really, that's not true. China doesn't call it prisons. They have 35 million at any one time in re-education centers. But that's where we're going here. That's the United States, where the government ships in the narcotics and then puts you in prison for it. MSNBC, now at 6.5 mil, up from 1.3 mil. A nation of criminals. The polygraph test meets its match. Researchers find brain scans can be a powerful tool and are now testing them in schools on children. Washington Post. And it says, in lieu of the terrorist attacks, this is going to be needed. We'll all be brain scanned. So we're now a nation of criminals. The polygraph test meets its match. Researchers find brain scans can be a powerful tool in detecting lies. And it says here, some of the articles, I got a whole bunch on this, they're testing them in schools. The children get hooked up to the brain scanners to see if mommy and daddy owns a gun or if they've been smoking pot or drinking beer. This is the Washington Post, November 12th. But America's going to accept it now in light of the terrorist attacks, it says. I mean, I can't go on any further, ladies and gentlemen, with this. This is what America faces. This is what we're dealing with. This is America. This is what they stand to gain out of everything they've done. You already heard about the government prior knowledge, funding, training, organizing the terrorists, protecting them, threatening to arrest FBI and Defense Intelligence agents that were blowing the whistle before the attacks. David Shippers, the former impeachment lawyer, has gone public representing these men. But American news media won't report on it by and large. There's been a few articles. It's all over Europe. That's why Europe stopped with a phony UN takeover of the Middle East now. And we've covered the problem, reaction, solution section for you. And I'm going to go back through that again because it's so important. How the government uses terrorism to get all this through. But right now, we need to quickly, very quickly, get to martial law and world government section for you. And I had to really condense this down. The Washington Times, wartime presidential powers supersede liberties. Simply by proclaiming a national emergency on Friday, this is even before he enacted all this stuff, President Bush activated some 500 dormant legal provisions, including those allowing him to impose censorship and martial law. But it's to stop the terrorists. The Washington Times, Frank J. Murray. I interviewed Frank J. Murray on the radio, and the clips of that will be in the new film coming out. This is just an emergency report. Please get it out to everybody. Wartime presidential powers supersede liberties. And then it gets into all the codes and all the rest of it. What they're doing. 1878 military law gets new attention. San Antonio, Texas. Associated Press. And it's got all these generals saying we need to go ahead and get rid of posse comitatus and go ahead and get rid of the Bill of Rights and Constitution. And there's one interesting truthful comment here by one general who isn't too happy about it. One of them is very honest about it. Michael Spack, a former Army JAG colonel, now teaching at Chicago College of Law, says the exceptions made in the name of national security in recent decades have left posse comitatus a hollow shell. He says the law should be scrapped entirely. And then he goes on to admit any amendment to loosen posse comitatus would be strictly pro forma, or after the fact, he says, because as it now is construed, the statute has enough wiggle room for the government to use the military for domestic action as it sees fit. For 10 years before September 11th, they were training troops to take your guns and put you in camps. I made 2 films on that alone. We had black helicopters burning police stations in South Texas. There I go. I better show you some news articles on that. We'll put them over me here on the tape a little bit later. So, and of course, what is posse comitatus? America's military is largely prohibited from acting as a domestic police force, but with the increased fears of terrorism, some experts say it's time to rethink those restrictions. And it says troops will be patrolling the streets of America. 1878 law gets new attention, and they admit it's already been gone. Now they're just announcing it to us. Funny, getting rid of that law didn't protect us from terrorists. Tripling your anti-terrorism funding didn't protect us from terrorists. Now you're going to get $1.5 trillion over 5 years, 1/5 the U.S. economy. Will there be an incentive for the government to stop terrorism? Or will there be an incentive for there to be more terrorism? See, the new economy is subverting the Constitution and oppressing the people. Most countries work that way. We've been different. Now that's changing. Here's the Washington Post. Military favors a homeland command. Forces will shift to patrolling the United States. And it says it'll be under a joint command from NORAD and Joint Forces Command in Virginia. NORAD in Colorado, Joint Forces Command in Virginia. And it says they're going to put 358,000 soldiers on American streets to, quote, deal with American terrorists. And they're going to put 358,000 troops on the streets, 8 heavy armor divisions, and foreign troops. Oh, the foreign troops that we're training 6 years ago? Well, let me show you this. Military favors a homeland command. Go read it for yourself. Forces may shift. You show them what we put in my films. These are my films. Yes, that's what they've been training to do to Americans for years. That's from Police State 2000. This is just an emergency report you're watching, but it is important. 4 commanders seek staff role for the FBI to run domestic counterterrorism and patrol America. The New York Times, the FBI to run things with the military. Ah, there they were in California training. And that's a little clip off of a man being chewed on by a police dog on Fox. That's the militarization of America. Unbelievable. And that's what they give you to get control over the society. America. Little clips of the mainstream media interspersed with my films. That's a checkpoint we went through in Austin. Now they have the military out at those as well. U.S. bill calls for continental security perimeter. This is from the Toronto Star, highly respected #1 newspaper. Oh, there they are seizing Baptist churches here in the U.S. for no reason, not paying taxes. Thought the Congress isn't allowed to make laws. That's what the First Amendment says, respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Guess it's a new system here in America. But back to U.S. bill calls for continental security perimeter. We need to show them this, Mike. Yeah, we'll show them the black helicopters later. U.S. bill calls for continental security perimeter. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, and they call for UN troops on America's streets. Bush is proposing that. And they also proposed that on Nightline, September 18th, with UN Peacekeeping General McKenzie. That's the Toronto Star. Al Martin, syndicated columnist, wrote about a CNN special he saw about urban warfare training, where they actually call, ladies and gentlemen, see, they were doing this all before September 11th, and now look. Now they can let you know all about it and have it in your face. Behind the scenes in the Beltway. And he describes how they are now showing on CNN. Let's just go ahead and read this article. It's pretty important. What has not been explained to the American people is the reason why 35,000 Army Reservists, 65,000 National Guard have been called up. It is to maintain internal checkpoints. It has nothing to do with the external war on terrorism. All these people are being trained as U.S. Army School of Urban Control at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. CNN actually showed up with an urban training mock-up. We've been to these ourselves and showed you the footage. What they're training on and what the new internal security checkpoint is going to look like. It was mighty sinister looking. There was a barrier that went across the road. To the right was an elevated shed-like structure, elevated perhaps 15 feet in the air. It had a small second story that was open on it and a sign that read Homeland Security Internal Checkpoint. There were sandbags and a wooden arm that crossed the road that read 100% ID checked. Then there was a small shed on the right with a small barbed wire area behind it. On the structure was a sign which read, "All citizens not having proper identification will be detained. All citizens who are deemed to be acting in a suspicious manner will be detained." At each of these posts, there will be 6 armed Army National Guard reservists with M16s with a full field kit. On the top of the structure to the rear, the open structure on the top, there's a man with a machine gun emplacement. They showed the actual mock-up used for these purposes. They had new uniforms. They weren't in their regular uniforms. It's a new gray uniform, which we've shown you in my films. We went and covered this. With a gray helmet and a gray visor so you can't see their eyes, like the old executioner. Yeah, or the SWAT teams. Got to cover up the wickedness. Then the only thing you see is from their lips down. That's to prevent, the military said, any retribution from people that don't like the new system. See, there's going to be more terrorist attacks after September 11th, all orchestrated by your loving New World Order government. The uniform looked exactly like the Imperial Stormtroopers from Star Wars, except inside... the new uniform looked exactly like the Imperial Stormtroopers from Star Wars, except instead of white, it was gray. All the helmets have little transceivers so they can communicate with each other. There will be 6 guards at each internal security checkpoint, and there's another warning on the inside of the barbed wire enclosure. Any detainees attempting to escape will be shot. It was a yellow and red sign inside the detainment area. Then they showed a procedure where they're using to train these guys. An average American car like a Ford or Chevy drives up, and there's supposed to be a husband and a wife in the front seat and a couple of kids in the back. So they drive up to the checkpoint. The corporal comes up to the car and says, "May I see your identification, citizen?" Then there's a sign inside the camp on CNN that they showed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and at Fort Knox that says anyone trying to escape will be shot. Then it says they call everyone citizen. There's another spot on the gate that's X'd out, and the sergeant alluded to it. It says all citizens are required to present their national identification cards, but the sergeant said they left it blank because the legislation has not been passed yet. Now, this was on CNN 3 weeks ago, in early December. Now, or I guess in late November. Now, this report, this CNN report, was on CNN in late November. But I've been to these urban warfare training deals in California. We've got them from Swansboro, North Carolina, where they do it to real American citizens, where they walk up, you're in your town with a camera, they walk up and say, "Turn it off," with a machine gun, and the cop's standing by the man with a machine gun. Pulling families out of cars for real, not just training. Unbelievable. Let's continue. NATO lends a hand with U.S. Sky Patrol, NATO aircraft. Russia's entering NATO, by the way. There it is, Washington Post. I'm sure you already heard about this, though. NATO lends a hand with U.S. Sky Patrol. Russia may be given veto over NATO moves. That's from the London Telegraph. EU and Russia agree on closer cooperation. See how Russia's coming in to help police things? Bush wants UN and NATO troops on the streets. Continental Security Perimeter. Toronto Star, Associated Press. The New World Order. Bush launches UN offensive on terror states. The Sunday Times of London, there's Bush and Tony Blair in their speech, New World Order, New World Order. NATO plan offers Russia equal voice on some policies. That's the New York Times. Here's the FM 3-19.40 Military Police Internment Resettlement Operations, Headquarters, Department of Army, Washington, D.C., 1st of August, 2001, issued to all the military. That was good timing, right before September 11th. Bush law chief tried to drop habeas corpus completely, the Times of India, only got it dropped partially in the USA Patriot Act, Times of London. Line between military-civilian grows fuzzier. Even civil liberties groups moderate views on what's appropriate. See what letting some terrorists blow up a building does? Hitler blew up the Reichstag to get Nazi Germany going right after being elected. Bush did the same thing. Taking an Adolf Hitler play right out of Adolf Hitler's playbook. Terror war leads U.S. to embrace UN. That's the L.A. Times. See how it gets them what they want? UN says attacks show need for global court. They already have it. They want to expand its authority. EU to harmonize laws in name of fighting terror. It just goes on and on. Mexico shared border security plan, Los Angeles Times, and it gets into the UN with Mexican troops running the U.S. border. Oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Can't let America do that. We have less Border Patrol agents now than we did at the time of the attack. 1/3 have quit to go run the Border Patrol, to go be sky marshals. Abandoning the Constitution and military tribunals. You hear all this propaganda, how it's okay, getting you all used to it. But don't worry, the UN's taking control of Afghanistan November 25th. After years of sowing wheat, Afghans can now plant poppies. Now the new global system's in, they can go back to shipping drugs for the CIA. That is the Associated Press, by the way. So that's just some of what they're getting out of all of this. You know, that's just a small portion of it. That's just a small portion. I know I'm going fast here. There's just too much evidence. There's no time to cover it all, ladies and gentlemen. We've gone through so much evidence, it's ridiculous. We've shown you the government trained, protected, shepherded the terrorists into this country, had prior knowledge. The government signed documents. They're now public. They've gotten giant approval ratings out of it. They've gotten so much control over our lives. A lot of Americans are buying this fraud. And we're going to lose this country. We're going to lose our freedom. Your children are going to be totally enslaved in the next decade as this incrementally is increased, as the heat is turned up with the frog in the pot of boiling water. You absolutely have to stand up and start speaking out against these travesties, these outrageous activities today, ladies and gentlemen. The police aren't bad by and large, nor is the military. They're good people. They believe they're fighting for America. They believe it was attacked. They're going to help the UN take over foreign countries. But is that really helping America? And who's gaining from all this? And now here in the U.S., it's rationalizing and being the pretext for face scanning cameras and satellite kill switches going in many makes and models of cars, and thumb scanners going in at grocery stores and banks. Children in 100+ school districts thumb scanning to get their school lunches. We've already talked about all of it. And all of that was in trouble. People were fighting against it from both political parties, from the whole spectrum. And now the police state has gotten a huge jolt. It's raging forward. But there's 280 million Americans. And if you'll just speak up against this outrage, if you'll just get involved and do the right thing today, now, many hands make light work. You're not going to save the world by yourself, but there are solutions. Before we hit these final pieces of news and information for you to talk about how the government's leaving the borders wide open and leaving every real national security crisis burning, and they're telling you to give up your rights. But before we hit on that final segment of news and recap problem, reaction, solution paradigm, I want to talk a little bit about some of the solutions. One big solution is to spread information, to support local radio talk show hosts who tell the truth and who document the different things that are developing around this world and in this country. You can make copies of this special report, 911, The Road to Tyranny. You can get the new film I have coming out that will have much higher production value with more video and more audio clips and actual people that were quoted in all these news articles. Listen to me. Get the film. If 1,000 of you make copies, that turns into hundreds of thousands of copies. And then people make copies of those copies. It turns into millions of copies. That's what's happened with my other documentary films. I do radio interviews every day in this country, on big syndicated shows, on small local radio programs. And every time I do an interview, or about 98% of the time, I've done like 500 in the last few years, people call in who have seen my documentary films. People call in who have seen them on Access Television, or saw them at church, or saw them at their local university, or it was shown to them at the local VFW hall. You're having an effect. Many people, many hands make light work. So please get this video out to everybody. I mean, I know I've gotten really excited through the course of this, but that's the only natural response that we should all have. I mean, look at all this stuff, and I had to move quick. There's so much of it, and I didn't even scratch the surface. People say, well, the government wouldn't let those buildings get blown up. They'd get caught. You couldn't keep something that big a secret. They haven't kept it a secret. They've been caught 500 ways to Sunday, up one side and down the other. I mean, it's everywhere. And good people inside government are blowing the whistle and releasing these documents. The president allowed these attacks to take place and funded the terrorists. That is confirmed, ladies and gentlemen. So now it's up to you to take action and wake people up. Run for office, or someone who you respect. Educate them, and then try to get them to run for office. Or they're already educated of the perils of the New World Order. What's stopping them? What's stopping you? And never turn in your firearms. Fight for the Second Amendment. They're attacking it at the state, local, and federal level. We've gone from 300,000 gun dealers in this country 8 years ago to only 25,000 in 2001, rolling over into 2002. They're suing all the gun manufacturers. They've got bills on the desk of the governor of California and areas like New Mexico, bellwether states, to ban all previously made guns and make you buy biometric thumb scan guns. This is how they're going to do it. They're brainwashing your children in the schools to turn you in for owning guns. I see 20 news stories every day when I scan the news wires. So don't turn in your guns. Don't turn over your private property to the phony environmentalists. Get control of your local communities. Pass United Nations free zones like many communities have done. The bottom line is you can resist. Resistance is not futile. You have to stand up against all this police state garbage that we've been documenting for years. Now is the time. Tyranny will come to your door in a uniform. Make sure that the people in the uniform understand what they're part of. They believe they're doing the right thing. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. But the societal manipulators, the map makers of the mind, the social architects, the New World Order crowd, know what they're doing and are creating these crises as the pretext. In fact, right now, let's go ahead and cover that. Earlier, we showed you what the federal government is up to with the problem, reaction, solution paradigm. Create a crisis, demonstrate fear. Then your media talking heads said, well, if we just give our rights up, this wouldn't happen, framing the debate as if you give up liberty, you get security. That never happens that way. It's tyranny. The Founding Fathers taught us that, told us that. History shows that. So they create a crisis, frame the debate, that if people would just give their rights up, the bad men won't get them anymore. And the people come in and do it. And as early as 1962, the Navy, this was reported in the Baltimore Sun and ABC News, the government wanted to blow up airliners, the U.S. government wanted to blow up airliners full of Americans, sink ships, bomb Washington, kill John Lennon orbit, and blame it on an enemy. Attack the Marines at Guantanamo Bay as a pretext to invade Cuba. Now, I'm no fan of that communist filth, Fidel Castro, but you don't become Fidel to fight him, and we showed you those articles earlier. But here is the actual unclassified document. It was formerly top secret, special handling, now unclassified, justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. And it talks about we could blow up planes, sink ships, bomb Washington, and it talks about all the other people they could kill and what they could get done in 20-plus pages as a pretext for war and as a pretext for control. But this new war isn't a war against Cuba. It's a war against our rights, against our freedoms, to push in a highly scientific, criminal, cashless society to fully dehumanize society, ladies and gentlemen. So please get involved and wake up to it today. And remember, you do have power, and you're forced to fight this. You can lick boots all day. They're only going to squeeze on you that much harder. They've been slowly twisting our military for years to practice rounding up Americans to put them in concentration camps, in giant role-playing operations. And now it's actually unfolding. But remember, is there an incentive for the people running the government to stop terrorism? Is if every time there's a terrorist event, they get even more power and funding. They got their funding tripled in 1995 after the tragedy of Oklahoma City. They knew about that bombing. They let it go forward. Iraqis were involved. Jotto number 2, al-Husseini in court documents. Did you know al-Husseini, former Iraqi Republican Guard officer, brought here in '91 by George Bush Sr., involved in the Oklahoma City bombing to get the police state rolling? Did you know he was arrested by the FBI and Clinton ordered his release? Did you know he was working at the Boston International Airport on September 11th in food catering to the planes? No, you didn't know that, did you? Go check it out. This is the system. This is how they get control. So if we tripled their funding in '95, when they let terrorists attack us, when they had the intelligence and funded the terrorist, well, now they're going to get $1.5 trillion, 1/5 the U.S. economy every year. Then I ask you out there, is there an incentive to stop terrorism when it gives them high approval ratings as our saviors, when we rally around the flag, as we wave our flags made in China by slaves? Fight for what that flag symbolizes, the Bill of Rights and Constitution. Don't wave some flag made by slaves in China and then wave your freedoms goodbye. So, again, ladies and gentlemen, I had all these articles about how U.S. law says membership in terrorist group or advocacy of terror, no bar to immigration, passed by the Senate. You can be a member of a terrorist group or advocate terrorism. Nothing is done. In this story on my website from Human Events, it has a link right there to the actual law. They're not closing that law. The borders stay wide open. Mexico seeks shared border security plan with the U.S., with the United Nations. Los Angeles Times. Vicente Fox seeks to loosen border. Bush backs off of amnesty idea after terrorist attacks. But they're still actually leaving the borders wide open. They may tell you they're going to close them, but that's just to make you shut up. I mean, this stuff is actually happening. But, we hear North Korea and Russia are our friends and are reformed now. This is from the Scotsman, newspaper.co.uk. Russian gulags still in business. Kim Jong-il, hereditary dictator of North Korea, shipped 30,000 slaves to Russia to pay off a debt. And 1 week after Bush left earlier this year from Russia, Vladimir Putin had a press conference and thanked him for the slaves. Look at that. Russian gulag still in business. Kim Jong-il shipping him slaves. We hear Russia's reformed and they're entering NATO. Hundreds of Koreans flee camp in Russia, the Moscow Times. This just came out a few weeks ago. I mean, this shows our so-called friends. This shows what we're dealing with. Illinois UN official predicts new world order and calls for world government with George Bush. The Southtown Daily in southern Illinois. I mean, these articles go on and on and on, ladies and gentlemen. They're telling you to give up your rights. They're going to leave the borders wide open. They're using this terrorism. Last example, turn of the century, Italian grocery store. Mobster drops by. You know, that local grocery store that didn't pay me protection got burned down last week. I'm not going to burn down your grocery store, but Franco over there is. Equivalent of Bin Laden over there is. But I can stop Franco from burning it down if you hire my cousin and pay me 10%. That's the same old thing. The fat guy in the suit at your door threatening to burn down your family grocery store, the classic extortion racket, is threatening you that Franco's going to burn it, but I can stop Franco, he says. You're looking at the guy who runs Franco. So when you're looking at George Bush, you're looking at the guy that runs Bin Laden. And they're threatening to burn down your grocery store if you don't let him run your life. That's the history of problem, reaction, solution. That's a history of extortion and control. When we have more extensive histories of problem, reaction, solution, the globalist favorite paradigm at Infowars.com. I'm Alex Jones signing off. It's up to you to fight this system. A more in-depth film is coming out in the next few months in early 2002, and we will expand on this expose. This has been a special emergency report. Thank you for staying with us today. Please check out everything we've shown you. When you find out it's true, you'll be forced to take action. Reach out now with a grassroots movement and defeat this New World Order. Liberal, conservative, it's all phony at the top. Their New World Order, cashless society, world government, and they're in your face now saying they want it. Again, God bless you all, ladies and gentlemen. This is the battle for the Republic. It's up to you, America. If you don't get involved, if you don't make copies of this film and get it out to every opinion maker in your area, there's a very good chance you're going to see more government terrorist events in the future. That's why you're authorized to make copies of this film. 911, The Road to Tyranny. I would like to thank Violet Nichols, Mike Hansen, Buckley Hammond for helping me produce this emergency release intelligence report. For additional copies of this film or other documentaries I produced, call the number on your screen. God bless.